beginning of this course? Do you remember the first thing that we talked about? We talked about what is linguistics. Do you remember? And do you remember the article that I asked you to read? What is linguistics? Do you remember also when I said we cannot study the language as a whole? Exactly. We cannot study the language as a whole. So we have what? Language components. Do you remember? We said every language or each language has components. Do you remember the components of language? Yes. What are the components of language?
Sounds and sentences.
Sounds and words, meaning and phrases.
Exactly. So we said we started with the sounds. Number 2, we're going to talk about words. Number 3, we're going to talk about phrases and sentences. And number 4, meaning. Exactly. Do you remember this?
Yes.
This is actually the outline of what we were going to talk about today. This is what we're going to talk about. Yeah, we're going to start with components of language, a quick review. Then we're going to talk about what phonology is. Then we're going to talk about the differences between phonetics and phonology. Then we're going to introduce you to a new term, which is a phoneme that we use in phonology. Then we're going to talk about what is the difference between a phoneme and an allophone. Don't worry, we're going to talk about all of that in the class of today. Okay. Components of language. I think you've seen this before. Yeah. And we said if you want to study sounds, you have 2 branches of linguistics that deal with sounds. Those branches of linguistics are phonetics and phonology. Number 2, words. Yeah? And we said we call that branch of linguistics morphology. Number 3, phrases and sentences, and we call that syntax. Then you have meaning, semantics, and pragmatics. Do you remember my question last time when I said, since actually phonetics and phonology, both of them deal with sound, why do I have 2 branches of linguistics then? Are they the same? This is the question that we're going to answer in today's lecture. Okay? So look at this. Phonetics deals with sounds. Phonology deals with sounds. So what is the difference between them if both of them deal with sounds? Do you see my point? This is what we're going to answer today in today's lecture. Okay. So we're still with sounds. We did not finish sounds. We have to talk about phonology, which is also a branch of linguistics. And it's a little bit different from phonetics. We're going to talk about the differences between them as well. What is phonology? Do you remember when we talked about phonetics and we said, what is phonetics? Yes. We talked about in phonetics, you study the production of speech sounds. Yeah, and we studied actually one branch of phonetics. If you read your phonetics chapter, you're going to see the first paragraph. It talks about 4 types or 4 branches of phonetics. I did not talk about this because we don't need them. In this class, we only study articulatory phonetics. Articulatory phonetics, it means it deals with the articulation of speech sounds. Okay, what is phonology then? If phonetics deals with the production of these sounds, what does phonology deal with? Let's look at this. Phonology is the description of the systems and patterns of speech sounds in a language. Any idea what that means? We're going to see. We're going to do this with an example for you to understand. Number 2, phonology rules determine which sounds may be combined. If you look at number 3, phonology is concerned with the abstract or mental aspect of the sounds. Now, you must be wondering, what does that mean? Yeah? What does it mean? Let's look at this. Now, we said phonology is a description, so it describes the systems. That's number 1. Number 2, patterns of speech sounds in a language. Also, it determines which sounds may be combined. So it determines the combination of speech sounds in English. Let me give you an example. Okay, let's think about, for example, a combination of 2 speech sounds, just like, let's say, these 2. Do you think the combination of these 2 sounds in English, the combination of these 2 sounds can be found in English?
No.
Words?
Yeah, in words. Can you find them in words?
Yes. No.
Yes.
Trap.
Trap.
Tree.
Tree.
Star.
Star. No, star. No, street you mean. Street. Yeah? That's enough. That's enough. Let's look at these words. So, in a word just like tree, trap, and street, all of these words contain the combination of the sound ta and ra. Sound ta and ra. Sound ta and ra. Who decides or what decides that this combination is correct in English? Phonology. So English phonology says that the combination of ta and ra in English is correct. You can find it in English. But where you can find it? In word initial position. Look at this. It looks like they are at the beginning of words. Can you find this at the end of words? At the end or at the final position of English words? No, you cannot find that. Okay, except for the word just like center in British spelling. If you find this is not how you pronounce it. Center, you have a schwa in here when you transcribe. Remember, we don't care about the spelling. Spelling is not important for us because spelling is misleading. How do you pronounce this word? Center, you do have here a schwa. So there's a vowel between the ta and the ra. So the combination of the sound ta and ra can be found in English in word initial position. Word initial position means at the beginning of English words. Exactly. Good. Let's look at another combination. I'm going to write it here. What about this? End. Yes. What else? What other words you can find? And. Find. Hand. Yes. So we have a number of words in English that include the combination of the sound na plus the sound da. The question is, can I find this combination of sound at the beginning of English words?
No.
Never. How do you know? You don't know all words in English. How do we know? Okay, all of us, of course, we don't know all words in English. Yeah? Even native speakers do not know all words in English. But we all agree that the combination of the sound na and da cannot be found at the beginning of English words. How do we know that? We actually go back to our phonology, our English phonology. English phonology says, you cannot combine the na and the da at the beginning of English word. It's impossible to find English words with a combination of na and da at the beginning of English words. But can we find this combination at the end of English words? Yes. What decides this? What determines these rules? Phonology. So when you talk about the system, the pattern, how you organize speech sounds, they say the organization of speech sounds. I'm going to add this. The organization of speech sounds. You continue writing that. So the organization of speech sounds. Okay, let me add that. Okay. So what decides the organization of speech sounds? Phonology. And remember, each language has its own phonology. For example, Arabic phonology is different from English phonology. French phonology is different from English phonology. But with phonetics, do all of these languages have the sound ta, for example? Yes. French has the sound ta. Arabic has the sound ta. Arabic and French has the sound ta. So when you study phonetics and when you study, for example, the production of the sound ta, it is the same for all the three languages. But with their phonology, the organization of speech sounds, it is different from one language to another. Each language has its own phonology. It means each language organizes its own speech sounds in its own way. Okay? So English phonology, for example, decides or determines that, okay, you can have the combination of na and da, but you can only have it at the end of English words. Now, also, English phonology says, okay, you can organize these speech sounds this way. It means you can combine ta and ra together, but you can only have it at the beginning of English words. Does phonetics decide that? No, we don't care. What do we do in phonetics? We study what?
The sounds.
The production of sound. How we physically produce these sounds. But in phonology, we study how we organize the sounds, how we combine the sounds. That's what it means when I say the description of systems and patterns. Okay? It studies which sounds may be combined together. Okay, I'll give you another example. I'm going to erase that. So, again, I'll give you another example of a combination of two sounds. Let's look at, for example, this and this combination. Ba and la and ta and la. Can you find a word in English that has the combination of ta and la together? Remember, no vowels in between. Do not think of vowels in between. Can you give me an English word that has the combination of ta and la? Never. Exactly. This one does not exist in English. What decides that? Phonology. English phonology says you cannot have the combination of ta and la in English. Think of a word in English that has ta and la. Doesn't have it. Think at the beginning of English words. I'm talking about at the beginning. Think about the va and la. Even at the end, it's rare to find this combination, right? Look at va and la, for example. Can you think of an English word that has the combination of va and la together?
No.
Never. We cannot find that. Who decides that? Why English says, for example, you can have this. Can we have this in English? Can you think of a word that has the combination of ka and la?
Yes.
Clue. The word clue.
Clip.
Clip. Clop. Yes? Okay, do not look at the C in here. We don't care about the spelling.
No.
Spelling is not important. How do you transcribe the word clue? Ka. So when I do this, I use IBA symbols, okay? I don't use the spelling. I don't care about the spelling. I care about the sounds. So do we have a combination of the sound ka? I'm going to use square brackets. And the sound la in English? Yes. Do we have a combination of ta and la? No. Do we have a combination of ba and la? No. What decides that? Phonology. English phonology says you can have that, but you cannot have this. Is this good what phonology is? Yeah? Okay. So we talked about the system, the patterns, how speech sounds may be combined. Let's look at number 3. Phonology is concerned with the abstract or mental aspect of the sounds. Any idea what that means? Any idea what that means? Number 3. Phonology is concerned with the abstract or mental aspect of the sounds. Let's think about phonetics for a second. Think about phonetics. What did we study in phonetics? We said we study how we physically produce these sounds. It means phonetics deals with what? With the physical aspect. Physical aspect. Why? Because we study how sounds are produced physically. What kind of articulators from the vocal tract are used? Yeah? But in phonology, it actually deals with the mental or abstract aspect. So in phonology, each sound is not represented by square brackets. It is represented by slashes. So the sound ta is represented in slashes in phonology because I think about it as an abstract item, not physically. If I want to think of ta as a physical unit, I would do square brackets, just like in phonetics. Because I think how I physically produce that sound. You see what I'm talking about? Are you following? Again, once more. So look at this. Phonology is concerned with the abstract aspect. So in phonology, they think about the sounds as abstract units. Not physically, not just like in phonetics. In phonetics, we think of sounds as physical units. Means you describe how you physically produce them, okay? In phonology, no. We look at them as an abstract unit. To represent that, we use slashes. That's another difference between phonetics and phonology. Now, notice in phonetics, we use square brackets because it represents the physical unit of that sound, the physical aspect of the sound. Now, if you look at phonology, we use slashes because we represent the abstract aspect of that sound. Good? In a minute, you're going to understand this very thoroughly. You're going to understand because we're going to talk about phoneme and allophones. in a minute. Just keep it in mind. Keep it in mind that we look at sounds as abstract units in phonology. When we talk about phonemes and allophones, you're going to understand very well what I mean. Okay? Let's continue. So we understand what phonology is, right? Let's continue. Those are the examples that I talked about. Those are like further examples besides the ones that I talked about. Another example of that, the sound, for example, ing sound, as in word ring. Do you remember the word ring, how we transcribe it?
Yes.
Ring, yes. Will never appear at the beginning of English words. Can you think of an English word that starts with this, which is the sound ing? Can you think of an English word that starts with ing?
No.
Never.
Can I ask a question?
You cannot find that. Yes.
Phonology, does it focus on a specific language, or it's contain a slang language or street language or something like that?
Actually, they study all of that. You mean they study slang language? They actually study all of these. For example, they don't study, for example, the standard accent. For example, standard British English or standard American English. They also study other accents. Yeah, other accents, or let's say slang language. Of course, they look at this. Now, nowadays, for example, all of these studies in Arabic, they have it on standard Arabic. If you go and look for a book about the syntax of Arabic, you're going to see they're studying standard Arabic. But nowadays, they're actually asking people to write books about the spoken Arabic, what is actually used. Now, the street language or slang language, also they look at it. They study it actually more often in syntax, because the phonology of slang language is the same as the phonology of the standard accent. But the only difference between them is actually the syntax, not the phonology. Not the phonology, no. Okay? The syntax. Most of the time they have differences in syntax. We're going to see when we look at the syntax chapter, we're going to refer to some of the slang language and what kind of syntactic rules that are different from standard accents, let's say, or the accents that are used by well-educated people. Okay, that's another example. Okay, that's another example where you have the sound ing. Can we find this sound at the beginning of English words? No. How can you know that? You don't know all the words in English. Because we know English phonology. Actually, subconsciously, we know that subconsciously. Yeah? Without even thinking about it. I know that ing, I'm not going to find any word in English that starts with the sound ing. Even though I don't know all the English words. I don't know them. But I'm sure that you cannot find this. Because I subconsciously know that I subconsciously know English phonology, which decides that you cannot have this combination. Yeah? You cannot have this combination in English. Another example. Look at another example. The combination of da and na will not be in the sequence in the same syllable. Of course. Do you have this in English? You have a word that starts with that, for example. Or a word that actually ends with that. No. So this combination in English does not exist. Now, when I say this in the same syllable, because sometimes you could have this at one syllable and you have a syllable boundary, then you start with a second syllable. Yeah? So when I say in the same syllable, it means they're like a consonant cluster at the beginning, at the end, and in the middle if they are in the same syllable. Okay? You cannot have that, but you can have this. Can I have this? Yes, but I cannot have that. Okay. So if you look at the question here, what determines these patterns and combination of sounds? English phonology. Exactly for everyone. Exactly what English phonology is. Let's continue. We have a question here we need to answer, which is, what is the difference between phonetics and phonology? So both phonetics and phonology study sounds of a language. But what is the difference between these two branches of linguistics? Go back to the components of language. Do you remember when we said we do have two branches of linguistics that study sounds? You have phonetics and you have phonology. But what is the difference between these two branches of linguistics? There must be a difference. Because if there isn't a difference, they wouldn't have 2 branches of linguistics. Right? Okay. Any idea before I go to the next slide? Can you give me some differences between English and, phonetics and phonology? I just said some.
Yes.
I just said some, yeah.
Phonetics care about how we produce sounds in physical way.
Very good. And phonology?
Description of the system and
combination of sounds. Very good. That's number 1. That's number 1. So you can say phonetics deals with the physical aspect of sounds. It studies how speech sounds are produced. We study how we physically produce these sounds. So if you look at the sound ta from a phonetic point of view, it's actually produced tip of the tongue touching the alveolar ridge, and it's a stop, and it's voiceless. That's phonetics. Look at the sound ta from a phonological point of view. You say, what combination of sounds I can have the sound ta in? Can I combine, for example, ta and la at the beginning of English word? Can I combine ta and da, for example, at the end of English words, and so on? That's number 1 about phonetics. Now, phonology, we said it deals with the abstract aspect of sounds. Abstract. Why? Because we study the combination and the patterns of English sounds. It means what combination is allowed by English phonology and what combination is disallowed by English phonology. Good? Okay. So I have it here. We can actually add another difference. We can say to represent sounds in phonetics we use square brackets, and to represent sounds in phonology we use slashes. Exactly. And this, you have it here. Differences between phonetics and phonology. That was a question last year in the first exam. I think I gave them a question. What is the difference between phonetics and phonology? You have phonetics is about the physical aspect of sounds. I just said that. It studies the production. You don't have off in here. Just a minute. You don't have off. It studies the production. Yeah. Okay. So it studies the production of speech sounds by the vocal tract by the speaker. And we studied that in the first chapter. We studied how sounds are physically produced in the vocal tract. Now, phonetic transcriptions are done using the square brackets. Do you remember when I asked you to transcribe the words?
yes.
I asked you to use square brackets. Why? Because we're dealing with phonetics. You're dealing with phonetic transcriptions. Look at phonology. Phonology is about the abstract aspect of sounds. So it deals with the abstract aspect. It studies the phoneme. So we do have phonemic transcription, adopt a slash. It means when you think about the sound from a phonetic point of view, use square brackets. When you think about the sound from a phonological point of view, use slashes. The question is, look at this. You have here, phonology is about the abstract aspect of sounds. It studies the phonemes. It raises a question, which is, what is a phoneme? Yeah? Okay. What is a phoneme? That is next. So we said phonology deals with phonemes. What is a phoneme? Look at this. Look at this. What is a phoneme? A phoneme is a meaning distinguishing sound in a language. What does that mean? We're not going to just state words. We're not going to give you like definitions and not explain what these mean. Let's look at these two words, these two pairs of words. You have bat and you have pat. You have had and you have hat. Let's look at the sound here in bold. You see the sound that is written in bold and the sound here. Now, look at the sound pa. If I replaced... Okay, just a minute. Sorry, I touched that. I'm not supposed to touch it. Okay. Look at the sound ba in bat. If I replace the sound pa in here with another sound, does it change the meaning of the word?
Yes.
Yes. Try to change part in here. Try to put the ba, not the pa. You're going to end up with a totally different word. It means ba and pa are phonemes. Why? Because they change the meaning of the words. Look at here also. This is the test. This is the test that we use to know if this is a phoneme or not. Okay? Let's look at this. For example, the word had and hat. Try are phonemes. I'm representing the abstract aspect of the sound, okay? So I use slashes. I say pa, pa, ta, da, and ta are phonemes because they can bring a difference in meaning between two words. You're going to understand very well why do we call these phonemes. Sometimes we have other sounds units that do not change the meaning of words, and that's what we're going to explain next. Okay, so far all I need you to understand, we say ba and pa and da and ta are phonemes. Why? Because they change the meaning of words. It means if you replace the da with a ta, you have a totally different word. If you replace the pa with a pa, you have a totally different word as well. Good? Okay. So this is the phoneme. The phoneme can change the meaning of words. Exactly. Let's look at this. Let's look at this for a second. It says here, each phoneme has different versions that are produced in actual speech. Okay, let me think about the word, for example, tree. Tree for a second. If I try to pronounce this word without the aspiration, without ta, without saying tree, now if I said it tree, I'm not using any aspiration in here, I'm just saying the sound ta, tree. Is this how this word actually produced? No. How do native speakers produce the word tree? Tree. Tree. It's not tree. Tree. So what do they actually do? It's like there is a small H in here when they pronounce it. Tree. It's not tree. So you did not saw a tree. You saw a tree. Tree. So this one is actually ta. 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 It's like there's a small puff of air coming out of my mouth when I say ta. Tree. Train. It's not train. You don't pronounce it as train. How do you pronounce it? Train. Train. Just like we learn. You have A, just like face. Okay? So say train. So what happens in here? The sound ta is aspirated. Okay, let's go back here. Please don't be distracted. Let's go back here. So we said in a word just like tree, we don't pronounce it as tree. We say tree. Yeah, that's how native speakers pronounce it. Okay? So, how do we actually pronounce it? What happens is like there's a small itch in here, like ta, ta. We call this an aspirated ta. Okay? Aspirated. Okay, in a minute, in the next slide, you're going to see how you spell the word aspirated. So this is an aspirated ta. So look at this. You do have the phoneme ta, but in real life, in actual life, you don't pronounce it as ta. You pronounce it differently according to the word position. So if you have it, for example, in word initial position, you're going to aspirate. You're going to say ta. Tree. Let's say tram. Train. You have to aspirate. Okay? We call this process aspiration. Aspiration. So what do we do in aspiration? We produce a small puff of air. Ta. We also have it with the other voiceless stops. Aspiration happens with voiceless stops. What are the voiceless stops? Can anyone please remind me? What are the voiceless stops?
We have vibration.
No, what are they? What are the sounds? The sounds. Voiceless stops. What are they? You have ta, pa, and ka. Yeah, remember the stops are ta, da, ka, ga, pa, and ba. I'm looking for the voiceless stops. Voiceless stops are pa, ta, and ka. All of these three sounds are aspirated in word initial position. So you have in a word just like, it's not put, it's put. You have to aspirate, put. It's not key, it's key. You have to aspirate the ka. Aspirate the pa, aspirate the ka, and the ta in word initial position. Good? So in a word just like pa, put. A word just like that has ka, just like key. Key, put, and tree. You see what we're doing here? Okay. So we call this process aspiration. So the phoneme ta has a version, a different version according to its position in the word. So because it's in word initial position, you have to aspirate. Good? Okay. If you look at number 2, in a word just like by the sound sa. In a word just like star, I'm not going to aspirate the ta because it's preceded by the sound sa. In a word just like sky, I'm not going to say sky, just like key. No. You're not going to aspirate the ka in the word sky. Why? Because it's preceded by the sound sa. So we don't aspirate if you have the sound preceded by the sound sa. When do we aspirate? If we have one of the voiceless stops, pa, ka, and ta, and they are in word initial position, and they are not preceded by the sound sa. Good? With the aspiration rule. This is very important. Okay, let's look at this ta. This is not a normal ta. Okay, can anyone please pronounce this word for me? How do we pronounce this word? Eight. Does it sound like a normal ta?
No.
It's like a ta with a combination of a little of tha. 8. So what happens? You have a dental ta. A dental ta. This small symbol here to represent that you have a dental ta. For example, if you look at the small h in here, this one to represent the aspiration. We call these symbols, these small symbols, diacritics. Diacritics, okay? So, these diacritics represent something. The small h represents that this sound is aspirated. The small diacritic in here represents that this is a dental ta. Where can we find it? If it's actually followed by a tha sound. Eight. It doesn't sound like a normal ta. Yeah? So you have here 8 star tree. You see the difference in the sound ta? So it depends on the position of the sound ta. It actually has to do with phonology, because if you talk about the position, the distribution of a sound, the context in which this sound occurs, you talk about phonology. Exactly. So you have 8. It's a dental ta. Let's look at the fourth one. Is this going to be to pronounce ta in American English? No. What is this symbol? We talked about it. What is it? The flam. Exactly. So the ta here is not going to be pronounced ta in this position because it is between two vowels. You're going to flap it righter. Yeah? Just like what Americans say that. Americans are going to flap the ta in here because it is between two vowels. So the context, yes, city.
It's like butter.
Butter, yes. That's how Americans say it. Okay? So it's not going to be a normal ta for Americans, for example. They're going to flap. Why? Because of the position of the ta in the word. They're going to aspirate if you have ta in word initial position. If it's preceded by sa, it's not going to be aspirated. It's going to be just ta. It's actually followed by a tha sound. They're going to have a dental ta. If it's between two vowels, they're going to flap it. So the position of the sound ta actually determines how we actually produce that sound. This is the phoneme ta, but in actual speech, you're going to pronounce it differently depending on its context, depending on its position in the word. Do you see what I'm talking about? So they decided to call this a phoneme because it's the mental aspect of the sound, and they call these allophones. Allophones. Because what are allophones? They are different versions of the phoneme. So you have the phoneme ta. The phoneme ta is not pronounced ta in actual speech. It depends on its position in a word. So if you have it initially, you have to aspirate. If it's preceded by a sa initially, you don't aspirate. If you have it between vowels, you flap in American English. And if it's followed by a tha sound, just like 8, you're going to have a dental ta. You see what I'm talking about? Those different versions are called allophones of the phoneme ta. Good. You have the explanation, the next slide. So these different versions is called phones. If you refer to them as phones and allophones, they're similar to each other. It's like allophone is the physical realization of the phoneme, and phone is like in the middle between them, between the phoneme and the allophone. Okay? So you can refer to them as phones or allophones. So look at this. These different versions are the flap, the dental ta, the aspirated ta. All of them are phones. Phones are phonetic units and will appear in square brackets, of course. When you refer to phones or allophones, you have to use what? Square brackets. Why? Because they are physical realization of the mental aspect of the sound, which is the phoneme. Good? Okay. When we have a set of phones, all of which are versions of one phoneme, we refer to them as allophones of that phoneme. So if we go back here, all of these ta, you have ta, ta, and ta, like affixed by a ta sound. Then you have the flap. All of these sounds are called allophones of the same phoneme. So you can say phones or allophones of the same phoneme. Good? So a set of phones are allophones. Look at this. A set, if you have a set of phones, all of which are versions of one phoneme, we refer to them as allophones of that phoneme. So it seems that phonemes can have allophones. Phonemes can have different versions. It depends on what? Their different versions. It depends on what? The position of that sound in the word. Exactly, on its position. If it's in initial position, if it's in medial position, if it's in final position, if it's between vowels. Good? This is the explanation that I explained a while ago. So you have the t sound in the word tree is normally pronounced with a stronger puff of air than is present in the t sound of the word star. So you're going to say tree, but you're going to say star, not star. You're not going to aspirate the t in star because it's preceded by a sa sound. The small puff of air is called aspiration. This is the rule of aspiration. This small puff of air, the small h. Do you remember the small h?
Yes.
Do you remember the small h in here?
Full aspiration.
Yeah.
This h, small h, you call this sound an aspirated sound. And we call this process aspiration. Remember, the aspiration is not only with ta, you also have it with pa and ka. So it happens with voiceless stops. Exactly, with voiceless stops in word initial position. And if they are not preceded by the sound sa. Okay, so far, I'm sorry we don't have a pen. I could write that, but the pen is not working. So you have to listen to what I say, okay? Look at this. In the pronunciation of a word like a, the influence of the final dental ta, so the sound ta, which is a dental sound, is going to affect the pronunciation of the ta, right? Causes a dental articulation of ta sound. This would be represented as the dental ta. You're going to have like a small diacritic underneath the sound. You see the small diacritic, the small symbol. Yeah, the small symbol, this one is a dental symbol. Why this one? Why this ta has become a dental? Because it's influenced or affected by the ta sound, which is also a dental. Good? Okay. And the last one, the ta sound between two vowels in a word like writer, just like they pronounce it in American English. Remember, the flap, you only have the flap in American English, okay? Often becomes a flap, which we represent as like a capital V. Okay? And what do we call these different versions? Allophones of the same phoneme. So if you have a set of phones, you call these allophones of the same phoneme. Okay. The question is now, can we tell the difference between an allophone and a phoneme? Let's go back here. What do you think the difference is between, so those are allophones. I'm going to use the mouse. Those are, do you see these? These are allophones. Allophones of the same phoneme, ta. The question is, what is the difference between these allophones and the phoneme ta?
They originally come from the same source.
Good. All allophones come from one phoneme. These different versions are a different version of one phoneme, which is ta. Other differences, what can you see? What is the difference between them? What are we using here?
What?
Slashes.
Yes.
Here we're using square brackets to represent allophones. What else?
Phonemes care about the position of sound, which is if the sound is from the beginning of the words or the end of the words.
You mean allophones You mean the version of that phoneme or an allophone depends on the position of that sound in a word. Good, okay. What else? Okay, look at this. Let's look at this word tree. Okay, if I said tree, not tree, tree, would you understand what I'm talking about?
No.
Yes, you're going to say, oh, yes, she's talking about the tree. So if someone actually who's not a native speaker of English came here and said tree, I saw a tree, would you understand what he's talking about? Yes. Okay, if someone here did not do the flap and they say writer, would you understand what this person is saying? Okay, if someone here did not use a dental ta, 8, you would understand that. If someone actually aspirated the ta in star when you're not supposed to aspirate that, would you understand what this person is talking about? Does that mean allophones change the meaning of words? No. What about phonemes? Yes, they change the meaning of words. So if I actually try to replace one phoneme for another, you're going to understand the meaning of words. It doesn't change the meaning of words. So if I said tree or tree, same thing. People will understand, people actually who understand English will understand what I'm talking about, even if I did not do the aspiration. If I said writer, not writer, just like Americans. Americans will understand that. Will understand I'm talking about writer if I said writer. Would they understand? Yes. Why? Because these allophones do not change the meaning of words. What about phonemes? Do you remember? Do you remember this? Do they change the meaning of words? Yes. So try to replace, for example, the phoneme. Yeah. Try to replace this phoneme with another phoneme. You're going to end up with a totally different word. Try to replace a phoneme with an allophone. It doesn't change the meaning of words. Exactly. So this is the main difference between phonemes and allophones. Yes, Amir.
You say that allophones are about the accents.
Accents? No. The aspirated ta is actually in all accents of English. You have to aspirate. In British and American, Scottish, all of them aspirate. Okay? You're talking about the flap. The flap has to do with American English. Only the flap. But if you look at the ta, for example, the ta sound, you have to aspirate in all accents of English. It's a rule of aspiration. It's a phonological rule. What does it mean, phonological rule? It means you have to do it when you pronounce English. So you have to aspirate in British English. You have to aspirate in Scottish English. You have to aspirate in Australian English. Australian people aspirate the ta, the pa, and the ka in word initial position. Okay? Aspiration is a phonological rule for all English accents. But if you look at the flap, that's a good question, because if you look at the flap is not a characteristic of all English accents, sorry. Just American accent. You only find the flap in American accent. Okay? Good question. Okay? But about the aspiration, no, it's for all English accents. You have to do the aspiration. Good? Okay. So this is the difference between the phoneme and the allophone. Look at this. The crucial difference between phonemes and allophones is that substituting, it means replacing. Okay? Replacing one phoneme for another will result in a word with a different meaning. Do you remember? Try to replace ba with pa, you're going to end up with a different meaning. Try to replace da and ta, you're going to end up with two different words with totally different meanings. But with allophones, you have as well as different pronunciation, of course, but replacing allophones only results in a different and perhaps odd pronunciation of the same word. You see, odd pronunciation, you know what? Odd? Strange. So when you say tree, this is not how native speakers of English pronounce this word. How did they say it? Tree. Like t. You have a t sound, aspirated t. So if you don't aspirate, it's going to result in a very strange and odd pronunciation of the word. Again, so we talked about the phonemes and allophones in today's class, right? And we said, what is the difference between a phoneme and allophone? We said a phoneme changes the meaning of words. And if you want to give an example, this is the example of how phonemes can change the meaning of words. So ba is a phoneme, ta is a phoneme, da is a phoneme, and ta is a phoneme because they change the meaning of words. Try to replace one phoneme for another, you end up with totally different words. With allophones, if you replace one allophone for another, it doesn't change the meaning of words. It doesn't affect the meaning of these words. Is this clear?
Yes.
Do you have any questions about this? Okay, let me show you where you can find this in the textbook. You can find everything that I talked about today in the textbook. Also, we're going to attach the slides to the video. Okay? You can find them. Do you know how to get the slides?
Yeah.
All of you know?
No.
Okay, I'll show you today when we finish with this
Okay.
with this textbook. Okay, let's look at this. Let's look at chapter 2. So they talked about, if you look, it says here the sound patterns of language. It means phonology when you talk about sound patterns. You have page 53. You can find here phonology. On page 54, you can find here the definition of phonology. What phonology is the description of the systems and patterns. You can also add what I gave you. Also, it determines the combination or what sounds may be combined in a language. Okay. Also, they talk about the allophones here, allophones of tongue. Okay. They talk also about phonemes. And if you look at the first line in the phoneme section, each one of these meaning distinguishing sounds. Distinguishing sound, it means they can change the meaning of words if you replace one phoneme for another. Okay, what else you have here? Very important. Yeah, look at the last paragraph of the phoneme section. Yeah, it talks about, for example, the combination of the and la sounds. And they say, for example, the and la cannot be found in the beginning of English words. You see that? You read this. You read this paragraph by yourself. You can find what we talked about. We talked about this today. Also, you have phones and allophones. In this section, they talk about the differences between phonemes and allophones. They talk about aspiration, if you see. The ta sound. Look at the last line. Last line on page 55. Last line. Do you see the aspirated ta? Yeah, with a small h. Then also they talk about the dental ta. You can find this in this paragraph. The dental ta with a small diacritic at the end of the ta. Also you can find the flap. You see the flap? Also, if you look at the second paragraph on page 56, you're going to see the difference between a phoneme and allophone is the same thing I have here on this slide. Same thing. The crucial distinction, or I have a difference here, distinction or difference between phonemes and allophones, you continue that. Same thing. So what you have in this paragraph is the same that you have on this slide. Okay, what else they talk about? Yeah, I did not talk about nasalization. I did not talk about narrow phonetic transcription. We're going to leave nasalization and narrow phonetic transcription for next class, okay? I'm not going to talk about them today. Go to the study questions, please. Go to the study questions. You can look at question number 1 and you can look at question number 3. Page 60. You can look at question number 1 and number 3 for today. Yeah? 1 minute or 2 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes. Look at these two questions, 1 and 3. Anyone? Number 1. What is the test used for determining phonemes in the language? How do I know this is a phoneme? How can I tell? What test I can use? Yes?
Put the phoneme in other words and
Exactly. Try to replace one phoneme for another. If it changes the meaning of the word, it's a phoneme. If it doesn't change the meaning of the word, it's an allophone. Okay? Again, number 1, what is the test used for determining phonemes in English? We try to replace one phoneme for another. If it changes the meaning of the word, it's a phoneme. If it doesn't change the meaning of a word, it's an allophone. You have another question, number 3. How does an allophone differ from a phoneme? We just did that. We talked about it. Someone else can remind us, please? Need someone to remind us what is the difference between a phoneme and allophone?
Allophone is different versions of an phoneme.
Exactly. And it what?
When you change the allophone, the meaning doesn't change.
Exactly.
And the word doesn't change. But in phoneme, when we change the sounds, we change the whole.
Exactly. So phonemes change the meaning of words. Allophones do not change the meaning of words. Can you give us an example? From the examples you have in the slide. Okay, that question was last year in the first exam, okay? I think the question was, what is the difference between an allophone and a phoneme? And give examples. Can we give examples? Yes. Give, for example, the aspirated ta. You say, for example, the aspirated ta does not change the meaning of the word tree. To give an example of a phoneme, the ones that I give you here. Yeah. Yes, you can give an example here. Good? Okay. I think this question we gave it for students each year. What is the difference between an allophone and a phoneme? And give examples. Good so far? Do you have any questions?